Okay, hello everyone. This is Razvan from cognitiveSEO, and today we have Mike King from iPullRank. Mike is the founder and managing director of iPullRank, an agency specializing in performance marketing. He consults with companies all over the world, including brands ranging from SAMP, American Express, and HSBC, as well as promising startups and small businesses. I will let also Michael now introduce himself quickly.
Hello. Hey everybody, Mike King, happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. Don't really have anything else to add to that fantastic intro.
I know you started, or if you can tell our listeners, when did you start to work in SEO? Was this your first career, or you had another career before SEO?
Yeah, so I've started in SEO in 2006, and I worked in more in the development side of things. So I went to school for computer science, and I did a bunch of internships and such around being like a software engineer and such. But then I decided I wanted to do music instead, so I did that for 8 years between school and SEO. So being a musician taught me a lot about marketing and kind of set me up to fall into SEO once I did, and that's exactly what happened. I got into an accident, and I needed to get a job because I didn't have health insurance, and the first place to hire me was an SEO agency because of my development background.
Okay. And what intrigues you most about digital marketing?
I like the idea that we have the opportunity to really affect how people are thinking about things. So it's not just advertising, of course. It's also this idea that we can put the right thing in front of the right user at the right time, and then effectively measure it to see did that impact that we expected actually happen. So I think it's really compelling, the measurement part of it, and then also just the ability to really target precisely who we're trying to get.
I also know you're a speaker at various conferences. How did you start on the speaking circuit? Was it first with the digital marketing career, or did you have any experience before that?
So I'd done speaking before, but a completely different context. It was always like me as a rapper coming in to speak about hip hop related things, or speak to troubled kids and things like that. So I've always been comfortable with speaking because it's very similar to performing, right? But as far as getting involved in speaking in the marketing side, I just started from blogging. So I started blogging on Moz, and then I went to MozCon, and then I just got really inspired by some of the speakers. And I was like, hey, I could probably do this too. And so I pitched for SMX East, and then some people saw me and they thought I was pretty good, and so it just created that snowball effect where I just kept getting invited to things, and now here we are.
Okay, and now are you still doing your SEO yourself, or you mostly manage the company?
Yeah, it's a combination. Like there are instances where I'm working on projects directly, and then there are instances where the team is taking it over entirely. So it all depends on the campaign and the needs. There are things that my team is far better than me at, and so in those cases I make sure to defer to them. But then there's also situations where it's like I'm the expert on the given thing, and so I'm the one that works on it. So it all depends on what the engagement is, but as we grow, I hope to get to a point where I can be more on the strategic level, rather than having to dig into the weeds as much as I do.
When you switched from being a programmer to SEO, did you try to use your programming background from an SEO perspective to help you implement better various strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was largely from an analysis standpoint, that there was a lot of things in the space early on, or when I say early on, like 5-10 years ago, where there just weren't tools for things. So I'm clearly a cognitive SEO user because I believe in it. I think it's a great tool. But before it existed, I built like my own kind of version of that that was nowhere near as sophisticated as what you guys do. But
Thank you.
something that basically took all the links from the different link indices for a domain, and then would crawl them and collect a ton of data on them. So that was like one of the tools that I built to help speed up what I was doing. And I had a lot of small things like that. Well, I mean, that one was probably the bigger one of the tools that I had. But I had a lot of small tools that, I would just build because, one, there wasn't anything out there, and the process that people were doing or I was meant to do at the jobs that I had didn't make any sense to me. Like, I can't stand having to copy and paste things over and over. I can't stand having to do things manually. And if there isn't a tool for it, then I just make it. And, also just having an understanding of how the web works based on my experience before that, it was incredibly invaluable for analysis, for, coming up with strategies, because there were things that I would want to do, and like other SEOs would be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, or I don't understand that thing that you found here and you're calling it an issue. So it was definitely very valuable for me getting into SEO because I had an understanding and the ability to do things that a lot of people around me didn't.
Do you think that nowadays, to be a really good SEO, you need to have some sort of technical knowledge, or is it enough to do content and be more flower power, let's say?
Flower power. I completely believe that the better SEOs are very technical, but that's not to say that people that have been awesome at content haven't been able to do great at SEO, because they absolutely have. End of the day, we all know that the most relevant content with the highest quality links is going to win. So if you're able to effectively put out the right type of content and then effectively build those links, you can pretty much overpower a lot of the technical issues. But that being said, if you're able to combine the two, you're going to do better than just the standard content marketer. So I think it's a nuanced question, but I think that, the best of both worlds is to be technical and to be able to be effective at content. And also, I think that a lot of the times that, people put too much weight on one and not the other. And then, there are people that come in that have both things, and they beat the person that is only strong at one or the other. And because your frame is like, oh, technical is everything or content is everything, you're not sure why you just got beat.
Yeah, talking about content and links, do you think these are the most important signals or factors when we are talking about Google rankings? Or what signals do you think are the present and the future in Google?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, yes. I do believe that if I had to choose between which factors are most important, I would say that content and links are still that. We've all seen sites that are technically garbage that rank very well because they have that authority and they have, the content that's, most valuable to the user. So I would say yes, those are still the things that, are most important. But what my platform has kind of been for the last year and a half is that, or I guess more than a year and a half, is that, we absolutely cannot ignore the technical components of it because of the fact that, the modern web is driven by things that are still difficult for Google to crawl. So if you're not really accounting for these items, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So I still think that, people should understand how the web works, because moving into the future, that is what, we're always chasing the algorithm, but like, if we understand how the web works, we know where they're going. And so as far as the future of search, I mean, it's still ultimately content and authority. And so when we're at a point where Google is becoming more the front end to the web, and they're just extracting content and then representing it through, voice results or through these other search features. It's still about the content, but whether or not they can access that content and understand it, it's still a technical problem. So again, I still believe that it has to be the two things working together.
And when you pitch to your clients content and links, because SEO ranking, improving rankings in Google now has become harder and harder, and clients from an agency point of view sometimes have hard understand these issues harder. They need to pay for, like, I don't know, 3 or 6 months until they see something to actually change in their rankings. Do you find SEO to be a hard sell nowadays?
No, I think it's actually an easier sell nowadays, because I think that, this understanding that you do need content in order to get links has been a paradigm shift. Before, even when I was at other agencies, it was always just like, just get me links, just get me links. But people understand now that, like, you have to create compelling content in order to position the site to get those links. So it's a lot easier to sell that. As far as SEO in general being a hard sell, I don't know that I'm seeing that either. I think people have a much better understanding of what SEO is at this point and what goes into it and how long it's going to take to get the results that they're looking for. So those conversations are no longer hard for me. Again, like a few years ago, it was far more difficult. But at the same time, I was always kind of behind a salesperson. So maybe that was why it was difficult. But now that I am the salesperson and I'm able to speak to these things in great depth, I'm not having that problem at all.
Okay, and do you find usually the sales pitch to be technical or non-technical when you pitch your customers?
Yeah, so it's a combination, because what I do is I want to show you, why you're having these problems. So I'm going to give you some technical aspects as to why that is, and explain them to you in a way that it makes sense and it has context for what you already know. So there's going to be components of it that are quite technical, but then there's going to be some components of it that are on the business level to really tie it back to what it is that you care about. So yeah, there's definitely technical components, but there's also a lot of stuff that's digestible as well.
Okay. Let's move back a bit to the SEO side of things and how Google ranks stuff. And I know you wrote an older blog post. Let's stop chasing the content train and get back to making experience that perform. Do you think that content is overestimated somehow nowadays?
I think that people put too much emphasis on content marketing. And what I mean by that is it's always the emphasis of, we have to make a lot of content. We have to make more content, more content. It's not necessarily about making more content. It's oftentimes about optimizing the existing content. And then some of that could be just technical fixes. If you're thinking about a big site as, tens of millions of pages and things are built on templates and such, there are optimizations from a technical perspective that will make that site perform dramatically more. Whereas a lot of people will come in and be like, well, these are listing pages and, there's not any real content here. It doesn't necessarily matter for that type of site. And so I think in large part, a lot of businesses are built this way, and then they're just like, oh, we don't have content, we need to do content marketing. That's not necessarily the fix for every business. So I do think it's overestimated in the idea that, it's this blanket fix that everybody wants to use. And in a lot of ways, technical SEO or technical components to, optimization in general have been downplayed in the last few years, because it's difficult to wrap your mind around what the technical aspects of SEO are. There's a lot of people that don't know the first thing about code, and dealing with developers tends to be very difficult. And so they're like, okay, let's just get away from that because we're marketers and we know how to, make essentially commercials and put them all over the web. So they're going more in that direction. And I believe that there is a lot more to be had from the technical side of it, if you just understand what goes into that.
And we usually, when you do content marketing and create pieces of content, do you have a specific strategy in mind to create successful content?
Yeah, so it's not that we like do the same thing for all clients. In fact, I mean the approach as far as how we get to what we're going to create is going to be the same, but we don't go into a client and be like, okay, well, we're going to do 5 infographics because 5 infographics always works. Like, no, what we do is we start from audience research, market segmentation to figure out, who's this audience, what do they want, what are they motivated by, what do they care about, and then we review the existing content within the frame of those market segments. So both quantitatively and qualitatively to see how it's performing, what's not performing, what can be repurposed, and then we have a sense of what needs to be created because we've essentially done this gap analysis based on the audience. We also do keyword research, which we then marry with the audience as well. So we can figure out, what are the questions being asked and what need states the users are in, or what stage in the user journey are they in when they're searching for a given keyword. And then we use that to inform what we call a content plan, where we outline what's going to be created, where's it going to live, what are the models, the workflows, and governance models for creating content, how's it going to launch, how are we going to promote it. So everything is planned out based on their situation, and then we figure out, what is it we're going to create, and then we move forward with that, and then we measure things based on what these KPIs are. So if the KPI is links, is it traffic, is it leads, things like that. And then based on that performance, we use the reporting on that to determine what we're going to do next and further optimize the content campaign.
Okay, and with the content campaigns, usually the target is to just drive traffic to the site or to boost other rankings also?
So it depends. It depends on the campaign, but in a lot of cases it is about attracting links, and then it comes down to how are we attracting links. So is it going to be through like PR level outreach, or is it going to be through your standard blogger outreach, resource pages, broken link building, things like that? Mm-hmm. So that ultimately determines how we're going to position the content, because if it's PR based, it has to be content that's big enough that we can roll off a series of different stories from it, because we need to effectively pitch different news outlets and journalists and such to have a story that they can tell that potentially no one else can tell. So ultimately, we're trying to figure out the best way to position the content for the goal. And in a lot of cases when we're talking about SEO, it is for links. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are trying to drive traffic back to the site, no matter which channel it is. Obviously, SEO or even paid search is going to be more qualified traffic because we have that intent. But end of the day, the user or the client is looking for us to drive traffic that converts. So that's what we're trying to do.
Do you usually in your outreach journey, do you also use PR companies to help you with attracting, I don't know, journalists or getting media coverage, or do you do it yourself?
Yeah, we don't. We actually do it on our end. In a lot of cases, our clients will have a PR group, and so we might consult with them on it. But beyond that, no, we haven't partnered with PR agencies on anything.
Okay, I know you have had a presentation in the past, which I checked, building your outreach machine, I think it's called, and you've talked there about a lot of technicals and models on how to do the best outreach possible. Which top 2 outreach methods or strategies would you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so the presentation that you're referencing, I talk about a lot of different tactics, but I also talk about how we're using machine learning for 2 specific things. One of which is for prospecting, and essentially if you've collected your prospects and kept that data over time. So prospects and saying, okay, this is a good prospect, this is a bad prospect. You can use a machine learning model to essentially determine from a new set of prospects which ones are likely to be good prospects for you. So that takes the prospecting process and essentially automates it. And then the other thing that we're doing is automating the overcoming of objections. So what you'll find when you do outreach is you're going to get consistent objections. So people might be like, oh, we don't take this type of content for links, or we only take money for links and things like that. So you'll see what those trends are, and you'll be able to determine what those responses will be. And then effectively, you can just use a chat bot to respond to that in your email. And I just talk about how you can do it. But as far as tactics that are generic, if you don't want to do anything like what I've described, video outreach is the most effective tactic I've ever come up with. Just use a tool like BombBomb, which allows you to send a short video and also get analytics on it. I mean, technically you could just use YouTube for it too, but you're only going to get the view count and all of that. And so, do a short video, like no longer than a minute, just kind of introducing yourself and saying, hey, I've got this content that I'd be interested in, getting you a link for, or getting a link from you for. And the reason why I think it works so well is, one, it's different, so you're differentiating yourself from all the other emails that people are getting. And then two, it shows that you're a real person, like you're not just a spam bot. So I get such a high response. I mean, I'm not doing it anymore, but we get such a high response rate from those types of outreach that it's like far and away the best thing you can do.
And you simply included this video as a YouTube link in the outreach email.
Yeah, so we're not using YouTube for it. Like I said, we're using a tool called BombBomb, which is like an email platform for sending video emails. But YouTube would be fine. I would recommend that if you're doing YouTube, you would do like a screenshot of the video and then a link. And you know how like on social media they have the play button on the email, on the screenshot. I would say take one of those, because then it looks clickable, and then the user will be like, oh, this is interesting, let me click on it. And then the other tactic that we use in our outreach a lot that is very effective is look up the most shared piece of content on the site. So whether it's using, any number of tools do this. And you can see, what the most shared piece of content is. If you reach out to them about that, it's likely that people have already talked to them about that content, so they're far more receptive if you use that in your outreach email. So we get a lot more response doing that tactic as well.
Okay, and how do you collect the prospects? So this is you told us about the part of how to actually do the outreach, a technique for doing the outreach, but to whom should people outreach? Because there are a lot of potential prospects collection methods.
Yeah, so it all depends on what you have. We use a tool called Pitchbox, and it essentially automates the prospect collecting for us, and it allows us to do things like, filter based on whatever metrics we're looking at. So if it's domain authority or citation flow or some of the scoring metrics that some other tools provide. But if you also have a very large list of Twitter followers, I would say use that, because what you can do is just marry that list with the linking root domains in your link profile. So, a lot of people put links in their Twitter profile. Then you just want to use like a URL expander to turn those from shortened links to the actual URLs, and then extract the domains and then compare that to the list of linking root domains in your link profile. And whoever's following you and has a site or writes for a site that doesn't link to you, those are all good prospects because they already have some sort of connection with the brand. So that's a good way to do it. Or you could use any number of tools. Like we use Pitchbox, like I said. There's also another tool. What's it called? I used to use this a lot. I'll get back to you on that one. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Okay.
But there's a variety of tools out there that allow you to do prospecting based on, search queries and such.
Do you think it's hard to go viral with content piece? Or how hard is it for potential customer to create a piece of content that goes viral?
So one, I just remembered the tool is called Ontolo. It's Ontolo, ONTOLO.com.
Ontolo. Oh, okay.
I don't look for pieces to go viral because I'm more focused on a very specific audience. If it goes viral, fantastic, but it's not something that I'm specifically looking to do. I'm more looking to, create something that meets the goal. And that's pretty much it.
You talked about a lot of tools. You usually use lots of tools, or you have a specific set of a minimum amount of tools to work with when you do SEO?
I definitely use a lot of different things, and it's definitely when people come on board here, they're kind of like, oh, there's so many tools. Like, where do I start? Because for me, it's very easy to like hop around and use the best of everything. But yeah, I definitely use a lot of things.
Yeah, there is no perfect tool. There are good and there are good tools at specific things, but I don't think there is any one tool that covers every aspect of SEO, as SEO is so broad and complex nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
From a technical perspective, at least. If you had the chance to tell every person that is starting in marketing and or SEO one thing, what would you tell them?
Learn how to make something. I think that one of the things that sets apart really good marketers is that they have gotten their hands dirty and they're able to really understand the nuances of things. And when you're just talking about doing things, which is largely what ends up happening when you're a consultant or you work at an agency, or even if you're in-house and you're not the one that's actually doing stuff, it's very difficult for you to be able to turn the idea into an execution. And even if you can do that, you may not have like the strongest idea because you don't know what it takes to actually execute. So yeah, I think it's really important, and it's something that I look for when we hire people, is that you can actually, do stuff.
What's your biggest mistake, fail that you've experienced in your career, and what did you learn from it? If you had any mistake, maybe you didn't.
No, I definitely make mistakes. Like if you don't make mistakes, you're not like trying hard enough.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because I make a lot of mistakes, and I definitely learn from them and try not to make them again. And it's also like hard to be like, oh yeah, this is a huge mistake, because again, I learned so much from it. Like, working at iAcquire was ultimately a mistake, but again, I learned so much from being exposed to a lot of things from the role that I did. So to that end, it's not a mistake. More recently with undergroundhiphop.com, I went in when we bought it, I immediately started going after SEO and content and such, but it would have been way smarter to go after paid media first. I mean, it's a pretty standard thing in e-commerce, but I didn't, because I was so confident that we'd be able to knock it out of the park, based on what we do for all of our clients. So yeah, those are two key mistakes.
You've worked with some of the biggest brands, Microsoft, Citibank, LG, I think. What is the most important thing that you've learned from working with them? And is it something that the smaller brands can apply as well?
I mean, it's interesting because, we get to see the differences between the smaller brands and how they operate, and then also the bigger brands. And the thing that I've learned from bigger brands is just that I don't ever want to get to a point where we're so big that we can't be agile and effective. There's so many organizations that we've worked with, and, they just can't do things because there's too many people that are
in the decision
chain. The decision chain, and not just that, like there's so many like political things that go on that stop the organization from moving forward. So that's the main thing that I've learned with working with big companies, is that I just don't ever want to be in that type of situation where, just our size stops us from innovation.
But did you also see something positive that a smaller brand could apply?
Yeah, I mean, there's the processes, and then there's also the quality standards that some of these bigger organizations put in place and require. And, it sounds like it may contradict what I just said, but at the same time, I do want to be thoughtful about all the things that we do and also just make sure that we're maintaining a quality standard, because smaller organizations, they want to move so fast that they're not thinking about, they're just simply not thinking through what they're trying to do. So I think that smaller organizations can benefit from taking a step back and being strategic, but also not slowing themselves down in such a way where they're not being agile. So I think there's a fine line and a good balance that needs to be maintained in order to be effective, and also just present yourself in the same way that some of these bigger organizations do.
Let's imagine that we are 10 years from now. How do you think the SEO landscape will look like, and will the concept of SEO still exist?
10 years from now, I think technology will be dramatically different, but I do believe that search will be our primary interface for everything. I think that search is going to be, primarily driven by voice at some point, probably in the next 10 years. But, that doesn't mean that, the desktop environment is going to go away. But I think that the primary mode will become voice. So at that point, it becomes, a lot harder, because a voice search isn't going to give you 10 answers. It's only going to give you one. So it's going to be a lot more important to be number one. But I think personalization is going to be just as big as the voice search being the interface. And, it's going to create these filter bubbles based on your implicit query and your explicit query. So based on where you are and who you are and what you've shown interest in, those being the implicit vectors, whereas the explicit thing is precisely what you asked for. So I think that personalization is going to be huge, and it's going to really require us to do hyper-specific content to penetrate those filter bubbles and be that one answer.
The hip-hop site that you were talking about, is it a side project of yours, or you're focusing full-time on it? You dedicate yourself professionally to it?
Yeah, UndergroundHipHop.com, we purchased that at the top of the year. And essentially what we do is we treat it like a client. So, the same way that one of our clients gets X amount of hours per week, so does UndergroundHipHop.com. But of course, me being, the owner of it, or the majority owner of it, there's a lot that goes into just operating the business. And so we do have a couple people on staff that just do that. Like, we've got a guy who, packs the boxes and sends them out and all that. We have a guy who manages inventory and manages the sales and such. And then the team, the iPullRank team, is managing the website and such, and the social media and all of that. So, we treat it like a client, but there's more to it for me as far as managing it.
Do you see a difference in perspective in terms of owning this site versus treating it as a customer, as you said? In your mindset as a business owner, doing consulting for a client, or operating yourself and getting consulting from someone for this particular thing?
Yeah, it's definitely different. And, it's made me realize that in some of the consulting work, and I think this is true of most agencies, some of the consulting work, there's gaps between what you're presenting and then the client being able to do it. So I think that's allowed us, or informed what we're doing in such a way that we're able to improve it, because we've essentially had to eat our own dog food, so to speak. And then we're like, okay, this isn't necessarily enough for someone to take this document and then go do the thing. So because of that, we've made a series of improvements to our strategic work in order to be better for our clients. So I think it's a good thing, really.
If you would have $1 million to invest in a business, to start a business, what would you start now? What would you invest in?
I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't start a business. Maybe I just buy a bunch of Bitcoin. But no.
That's the business of trading, Bitcoin.
Right? No, but I'm very fascinated by, blockchain. I've been digging into it. We're actually doing an initial coin offering pretty soon. So I would definitely invest $1 million in a blockchain app, probably built on Ethereum to start, and then, pivot to my own blockchain later. But yeah, I think that space is really interesting. It definitely hasn't matured yet. It definitely feels a lot like SEO did when I first got into it, because there's just so much to learn and there's no rules. And there's a lot of opportunity to do really cool things. But to the point of it not maturing, there hasn't been a blockchain app or blockchain driven app that's better than a centralized app yet. And what's really interesting to me is creating something that is that good. You know, creating something that not only do you get the benefits from a decentralized application, but you also get benefits of speed and, you know, creating something that just changes what we do on the internet rather than just creating something that already exists and putting it on a blockchain.
Okay, it was a pleasure talking to you, Mike. We talked about a lot of things. SEO, Bitcoins in the end, your agency. Would you like to add anything more to this end of the discussion?
No, I mean, you know, just check what I'm working on. You know, like I said, we've got this ICO that's coming out soon. It's called Scratch. I've got undergroundhiphop.com, and of course, I've got iPullRank.com. We've got some really cool content coming really soon. We are wrapping up a guide to machine learning for marketers, which I think is going to be, you know, really interesting to a lot of people. So yeah, just keep checking out what we're up.
It needs to be digestible. It needs to be digestible when we're talking about content, when we're talking about machine learning and want to present it to marketers. Machine learning is very complicated, so you need to present it, I think, in a very nice format so people can understand it and digest it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely the goal that we have. You know, if you've seen the guide to Google Tag Manager that we did, it's going to be very similar to that. Hopefully it is digestible. And my whole goal with talking about machine learning to marketers is to demystify it and kind of make it something where it's not too different from how we approach everything else. I really like to think that most people, when they do digital marketing, they're just doing like an educated form of guess and check. So, you know, it's like, okay, let's throw this thing out, see if it worked. If it didn't work, we try something else. And effectively, that's what you're doing with machine learning. Like you're trying to trade a model, and then you try different models based on, you know, one, your experience, and then two, just trying different models. And you see if that model ultimately gives you the results that you expect, and if it doesn't, you try another model. So I think bringing it down to that frame makes it more approachable for marketers, and also just there being so many tools out there that abstract the math and also the programming of it, make it a lot easier for people to try it out.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion, and I would love to have you later on our podcast.
Cool. Thanks for having me, and peace out.